So you might have heard of kitchen floor resets, where you kind of have a little cry on the kitchen floor and then you reset your life and you start again. Well, this is what is called an office floor reset. Unlike with most trends I see bouncing around the internet, this idea that 2026 will be a year of trending analogue life is actually bringing me a little bit of hope, something I would like to very much join in on as somebody who has basically grown up on and currently works on the internet. I would very much like to encourage myself to spend less time here, more like using the internet as a place to go and report to what I've done rather than somewhere I actually exist. And in fact, I think maybe the whole world needs a little bit of an office floor reset when it comes to that. I've also been really drawn, while I made a video about why I'm not making any like personal goals this year, I do like this idea that people do where they have like a word for the year, like a theme for the year. And I have made my word analogue. Now, I really hope that I'm a person to observe and not a person to aspire to. I hope you can see that from my office floor. But I thought it would be fun to document my journey on here. Oh, hashtag journey. Hashtag document my journey. But document those moments in my life where I do move towards the analog and trying little experiments and stuff and seeing how I get on. So if you're interested in that and you're not already subscribed, make sure you're subscribed to follow along. And without further ado, here is how I am incorporating more analog stuff into my life. Oh, let's go. So it's been a couple of weeks of me trying to be a little bit more analog, and I wanted to give you some updates. 3 things that I have changed so far. I have started using a paper diary. It looks like this on the inside. I won't show you everything I've been doing and completely dox myself, but I will say that this is an Emma Bridgewater diary, and it also has these decorative spots at the beginning of every month that are just like different colors. But I've been using them as mini bingo cards, as like things that I could do that aren't pressure, aren't like life or death work tasks, but they are ongoing things like mend a cardigan for my sister-in-law, take more baths, clean my makeup brushes, like little wins that feel way less overwhelming than having this like ongoing digital to-do list on my phone. And I feel like I can just, I used to use a paper diary like all the time, like really intensely, probably till 2016, 2017, like longer than the other people were. I had little Filofax. So this just feels like really familiar to me, and it's helping me picture my week better. However, downsides though, I do feel like I also need the digital. One, because I share certain stuff with Craig in the digital calendar. And there's just stuff like when you book things and then it goes add to Google Calendar and you go, yeah, it isn't as practical in that sense, where it's not connected to your emails and stuff like that. But I do think I'm going to continue with it and see. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I have been using this camera that I got for, I think, £35. I was the victim of a Instagram ad, I'll be honest. It doesn't have a screen. It's incredibly light. It is technically digital, but you have to plug it into your computer to look at the photos. So I will check back in with you to let you know how the photos look. And I definitely feel a little bit nervous because I just know that on my phone, the photos would be well lit and in focus without me having to do very much. And on this, it feels like much more of a risk to like risk my memories. But I'm trying to sit with the discomfort of that, and we'll see how those pictures turn out. And then thirdly, I bought a magazine. I do subscribe to Ethical Consumer magazine, which is like something more that I read for work. But I bought a Vogue, I know. And I've been trying to read it in the mornings instead of scrolling with, I'll be honest, various degrees of success. But I have read most of that magazine, and an article that I genuinely actually really loved was an interview with Emerald Fennell about the new Wuthering Heights film. Now, all of the stuff I've seen about the Wuthering Heights film is people on Instagram shitting on it for the costumes. And even though I don't really agree with that take, it's definitely like sunk into my osmosis, and while I might have seen the film, I wasn't like that excited about the film because that's the only commentary that had passed my eyes. But having the physical magazine and like sitting with the words of the director and the producer, Margot Robbie, talking about their genuine artistic intentions, mediated through really well-written prose by a qualified journalist who is just trying to reflect on things. It was a really good article. It made me feel much more excited to see the film and much more like, open to the intentions they're going for. And also the pictures were beautiful. So I actually had a really nice time with that. And I think sometimes the internet encourages us to hear lots of opinions at once. And while I don't think that's bad, I think maybe it would be a little bit more healthy to hear all the opinions, but one by one. Like not all at once. Hear an opinion, reflect on it, see if it works in your own life, try something, then take on another opinion. Reflect on that, rather than being like, I'll eat 10 opinions in a row and see if I actually have the ability to access my own brain afterwards. I also have another analog experiment in the works that I'm very excited to talk to you about, but I think I'll save that for a few weeks' time when I've got like more reflections on it. But like that has been glorious too. Have I still been on my phone? Totally. Unbeknownst to me, when I set my intention for this project and being like, oh, I'm gonna have a year of analog. I didn't realize how the news was gonna go and how hard it would be to look away from, and how I don't think that I really want to look away from it, or that's not, which I think is actually something we should unpack later in the video, because I want to talk a little bit about my complicated feelings of going analog and actually how the trend of going analog I'm not completely convinced on, even though it's my word of the year. So I will save that potentially for the forest. I think we should talk about that in the forest. I think this is the right place. But yeah, I'm currently in London and I have been making memories with some of my friends. So I'm gonna take some more pictures on this and we'll check in later. Okay, so it is the end of my first month of trying to gravitate towards the word analog. No rules, just incentives. And I think something that I'm trying to focus on in this isn't to ban myself from my phone or kick an addiction, but more like recognizing that we are the first generation of people who are trying to negotiate like a new way of thinking and living and working with what feels like at this point hundreds of new technologies, which are confusingly mostly kept or sourced or accessed on this one device. So I think we demonize the device rather than separating all of those issues into different categories and learning the different skills accordingly. So at least at the beginning, instead of banning myself from stuff, I'm trying to create things that I want to go towards, like things I'm genuinely excited to do instead of grabbing my phone. And I've had some really nice times. I've been cooking more than I ever have before, which is some. The base level was microwaving my jacket potatoes and maybe boiling some rice. So the fact that I made some bread from scratch this month and also made my first batch of solo vegan mozzarella balls, which if you watched my video where I went to a class about how to make vegan cheese, that's one of the things that we learned to make. And I was kind of scared about making it on my own, but it actually turned out only taking 20 minutes and being bloody delicious. And the reason I was making bread is that we found out that Craig's seemingly out of nowhere, long story, allergic to yeast, wheat and tomatoes. So here's the bread that I made. It kind of looks like cake, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. So I'll leave the recipe below if you want to copy it, if you're also having a yeast-free, wheat-free new life that has been served to you. I've also been getting up in the mornings and occasionally, instead of scrolling, finding a reference picture on Pinterest and doing some illustrations, which has actually been really wholesome and very relaxing. And sometimes I have had entertainment on in the background, like I have put on a podcast or something. Maybe I should get a literal radio and tune into the genuine, if they're still putting out the radio. Are they still putting out the radio? I feel like they are. I haven't checked personally. They could literally switch the radio off and I wouldn't know. So yeah, that's been nice, particularly on my eyes. I feel like it's less abrasive to wake my eyes up with that than blue light. And then finally, I bet you're wondering how I got on with the camera. And unfortunately, I'll be making another enemy and yet another brand that won't sponsor this channel because I didn't enjoy this at all. Do you know what, actually, I was feeling really optimistic about it. I really enjoyed the fact that there wasn't a screen and it's incredibly light, so it fit in my pocket and I didn't even feel it was there. It didn't weigh down my trousers or anything because it's literally, it feels like a toy. Unfortunately, it also takes pictures like a toy and whatever light I'm in, I just got pictures like this, which is nice to have the memory, but I'm not asking for like art quality, like beautiful photos to remember hanging out with my friends and doing stuff. But at the same time, I was in some really beautiful places and I still feel like the pictures turned out really ugly. And to be fair, this is also me in that I think that I have been taking pictures on an iPhone for the past 10 years. They've been like low grade iPhones, but they have been like secondhand refurbished iPhones. And I think we have lost the art of keeping our hands still, because phones and modern cameras stabilize things so much for us, adjust the light so much for us, that keeping my hands still enough to take a decent picture on this, which I don't think is the best optimized for photos anyway, was a bit sad. So I don't know, I think I might sell this camera on Vinted or something. I'm willing to downgrade the quality of my memories, but not to this extent. So that was a bit of an analog fail. However, I did go to a photo booth and I took some pictures with my friend Ariel, and they were really adorable. There is this company in London who refurbish genuinely vintage photo booths. So they're like real cameras inside and they print them on real photographic paper rather than just like a digital print on shiny glossed paper. And they're really beautiful. And I love that we have this analog memory of that day that isn't stored digitally anywhere yet. Let's be real, I'll probably scan it in. On that day that we were spending together, we actually also accidentally analog planned the day. So we had a breakfast and we made a list of everything we wanted to do in that day. And we did the list, and every time we weren't sure what we were doing next, we pulled out the piece of paper. And that actually worked really well. That was really nice. We got loads done. So accidentally analog there as well. Finally, when it comes to doing projects with my hands that stop me scrolling, I have been making one of these melt the ice hats. You might have already seen them around, but essentially they are inspired by a Norwegian hat pattern that was worn in the 1940s to symbolise resistance of Nazi occupation and like the opposition to fascism. And essentially there's a yarn shop based in Minneapolis who have been selling this pattern to raise money to help people affected by ice. So I bought the pattern and I'm doing it. And even though I know that that is not affecting much apart from my monetary donation, it feels nice that I'm knitting this hat at the same time as lots of other people around the world who are also worried about the rise of fascism. And as I am knitting it, I'm trying to make the effort to think about what I can do immediately in my own community and like how I process the news and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes I am knitting and just watching a film with Craig, but I am also trying to use it as a time to like reflect on what I can really do in the world rather than just post on social media. But however, it's not true that I wouldn't have found out about this pattern and have this connection with lots of other people across the world without having seen it on Instagram. And I think that is where my complications lie. And I think this is probably a great way to end my first month of experiments by taking us to the forest and having those well-promised reflections. But first I must finish this round. That's better. Outdoors. So I obviously have been thinking a lot about this idea of analog recently, and unsurprisingly, when you're listening out for a theme, it comes up in everything you see. And I wanted to bookmark 3 places it's come up for me this month. The first, maybe semi-unpredictably, is with Benjamin Netanyahu. Yeah, we're going there. He did a speech recently where he said, weapons change over time. You can't fight today with the swords, that doesn't work very well. And you can't fight with the cavalry. But we have to fight with the weapons, listen, that apply to the battlefield in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are on social media. Future Lena here, just to clarify, I watched that back and realised it might sound like I'm saying that like it's an inspirational quote. I'm quoting him to highlight that somebody that I am incredibly against the actions of obviously values social media highly, and therefore we can't ignore that, because when our enemies think that something is a weapon, well, it's probably not best that we let them have it. Okay, hold that quote. That's your first quote to hold in your head. Second quote is actually from my favourite news podcast, The News Agents, which is basically like loads of really qualified mainstream journalists from the UK that have made their own news podcasts so that they can remain, I imagine, somewhat sane. Anyway, they were talking about Minneapolis and how Trump is slightly going on like the back foot with that and why that might be. And Lewis Goodall quotes Abraham Lincoln in saying that public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And his point was, because public sentiment against the ICE raids has been so vocal, obviously it's not going to make him repeal it altogether right away, but it has had an effect. It has scared people in power who are being little shits, to be honest. So hold that second quote in your head. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And the third thing was Mark Carney, who, if you don't know, is the Prime Minister of Canada. He did this pretty freaking good speech at Davos that, I'm not going to lie, I've listened to 4 times. And I'm not somebody who usually watches what even goes on at Davos, let alone listens to the speeches. And he talks about being principled but also pragmatic. When he was talking about it, he was talking about how they can't depend on the US for everything, and they're not just going to bow to their every whim just because they're bigger than them. But he said this line, he said, "We actively take on the world as it is, not wait for a world we wish to be." And a quote that actually is probably going to be my other catchphrase for the year, apart from going analog, which is, nostalgia is not a strategy. Nostalgia is not a strategy. How much does that all fit with this confusing tight walk I'm trying to walk between literally having a job on the internet and trying to make myself more analog? And I think the conclusion that I've come to is that yes, I live in my physical house on my physical planet, but I also, no offense, I kind of live here. I have been vlogging on this channel for 17 years, and I'm not gonna lie, without it, I don't say without it as like it's an inanimate object, without the people that I have connected with on this platform, whether that's watching their content or literally talking to them in the comments, like a lot of you, or meeting people in person. Let's not forget, I met my literal husband in the comments of a YouTube video. But there are opinions and lectures and video essays and thought experiments that I have watched on this platform that have made me into the person that I am. And when I started my channel in 2009, I still thought I was going to save myself till marriage, because I thought that's what God wanted. Like, that's where I was. That's where I was. I made a video debating as to whether I would call myself a feminist or not. A lot of you weren't here for that, but some of you were. I learned about what was physically happening to my actual soil, this place that I actually live on, because I was on here, because I was talking to all of you. And actually, a life where that didn't happen terrifies me. And yes, all the robots have got in the way, and there are some really annoying algorithms stopping us from having the productive conversations we could be having with some people. But don't tell me that we are not having like productive conversations on social media platforms. And I live here. I'm not just gonna leave and sit there with my fucking cassette player and not worry about it. I live here. We built these platforms, we built these communities, and I'm not going to give that up without a little bit of a fight, or maybe even just a little bit of behavioural experimentation, because again, we're also one of the first generations to ever have to deal with this mind-blowingly large access to information and like weird algorithms that are trying to control how we access it. But this isn't the first time that's happened, and this isn't the first time our brains have been broken over an information revolution. Thank you so much to Naomi Alderman, who wrote "Don't burn anybody at the stake" today, for reminding me of that. And while I think nostalgia for the past, where there was less technology, is valid and has its place, and I want to access that more, I want to explore in future analog vlogs about the good parts of discovering analog and what it has really helped me do and how it has trained me to have a better relationship with social media and technology. Oh, a mushroom. Hello, Mr. Mushroom. Sorry, I don't have mushroom in my brain for anything else right now. Wake up, Lena. We're trying to save the world. Yeah, while nostalgia is warranted in a lot of ways, it's also not a strategy. Going backwards isn't possible. And if Benjamin Netanyahu thinks social media is a really good weapon that should be controlled, I would also like to arm myself. Actually, where's my social media amendment? The people who are actively trying to bring about the extinction of the species, sounds like exaggeration, wish it was, are keeping their social media accounts. In fact, they're ramping them up. They're producing more content, which sounds like actually literally the worst time in the history of the universe for me to give up on social media. Because while we can be involved in our local communities, and that's something again that I'm trying more to do, to be more local, to act more locally, to act like a neighbour as well as just a citizen. That's not consensus. And actually, if we need to do things fast, and we need to spread information fast, and we need to alert people to false information fast, social media is actually a kind of sick way of doing it. I've seen some horrific things go down on social media, but that's not going to erase all the good things I've seen come from it. Even this week, I've been really moved by a guy who lost his brother anger to suicide and started a website called Reasons to Stay, where strangers could send letters to people who were struggling, and how fast that has amped up how many people, I think they have like 300,000 letters being written right now, and how fast that has spread. Imagine if that was just analog. Imagine if we just tried to spread that in an analog way. It just wouldn't have worked. And now that's having like a huge impact, and this guy's like crying on social media, and it's so sweet, and strangers are so nice. That's the thing that pisses me off in all these discussions about how social media is bad for everybody, it's bad for the teenagers, and it's bad for everyone. It ignores how fucking nice so many people are, and we need to protect each other, and especially younger people, from the horrible people that use the internet, or the horrible bots that are being programmed to use the internet, more likely. But like, my overarching takeaway from my 17 years of sharing my thoughts on the internet is strangers are bloody lovely, and they will help you, and they will change their minds, and they will understand. And I'm not ready to walk away from that simply with the promise of having a nice record player. I actually think an abundance mindset is necessary. Can I just not have both? Can I not get better at understanding my relationship with technology and social media, but like protect the good bits, stay about for the apparent battle we're about to have on social media, not just drop my stick and go, oh, what's the point? So yeah, end of Act 1 of me becoming more analog has resulted in me becoming incredibly confused about whether I even want this. But I'm excited to tell you how I get on in my future experiments, and I'd love to hear in the comments if you're trying to become more analog and which ways have worked for you and which ways haven't. A great example of what I'm talking about in the video is that this is my Melt the Ice hat that I made. If you don't know what that is, I made a reel about it, but this is like a group knitting project around the world of people knitting anti-fascist hats based on a Norwegian tradition from the 1940s, and all the money is going to Minneapolis, which is pretty cool. And again, a great example of social media helping a good consensus form and bring about something really bloody nice that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Okay, I might be stuck in a puddle, so I should probably go. This is what we're working with, so I should probably see to that. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you to the Gumption Club, of course, who enabled us not to be interrupted by a sponsor for this video. That's all thanks to them. If you're looking for a really wholesome online community, may I suggest us? There are totally ways to have internet community without social media, and Discord has been a big discovery for me this year, getting away from Meta as well. So if you want to join my Patreon, the Gumption Club Discord is honestly one of the nicest places on the internet. And that's not even my fault, that's their fault. They're just really freaking nice. I would love to hear your analog related thoughts in the comments. Frog Snug out.